Hey everyone, and welcome. I have a special guest on today that I've just been excited for a month since him and I talked about bringing Barton on my podcast to talk about this and give you guys such amazing information, just information that can literally change your thyroid and adrenal health. So what we'll be getting into, I can't even begin to tell you. We're talking mineral deficiencies, how it affects your thyroid, how it affects your hormones, how it affects your adrenals. We're deep diving into all of it. And many of you may have an eye-opening experience from this conversation, because so many of you, I know if you're one of my listeners, you're struggling with getting optimized. You're struggling with getting your thyroid to that optimal level. And you're doing the tests and you're doing the meds and you're frustrated. And it could be something as simple as a mineral deficiency, as a heavy metal burden that could be altering your thyroid function and preventing you from reaching that next level of health. So today's guest, Barton Scott, is a biochemist and founder. He's a nutritionist. He's a researcher. And for the last 6 years, Barton has been the founder and process developer behind Upgraded Formulas, which we're going to talk about today. Barton is passionate about helping people address the stressors of daily life, poor sleep, hormone issues, low energy, which many of you have, the toxicity of the modern world, the extreme lack of nutrients in our food and soil, and the nutrient absorption issues that we all face through education of the human body in our relationships, because the human body is a magnificent thing. Upgraded Formulas also supports charitywater.org and the great work they do through every single sale. And we're going to give you links and discount codes. Just hang tight. We will get there. So Barton, thank you so much for joining me and giving us your time today.
It's great to be here with you, Amie.
Yeah. Thank you. And you and I talked about your story, but I need you to share that with others because it's pretty powerful. So how did you come into this space, and what was your story with deficiencies and what you found with your own health?
So I was in my mid-20s and I was helping my mother with her health. And, I was born to older parents and, I had a couple sisters, but I was kind of an only child. So my parents were sort of like peers, and losing one of them or watching their health slip was something that was always just my number one fear. And sure enough, I after medication, after some surgery, more medication, I just watched this whole thing unfold, and I really saw that she was never going to get better using the medical system, even having the best access in that system, and what the system could offer, just the absolute best. And that really, I already knew that, but to see it firsthand, to see it so close, to see it tied to death, to see it's tied to suffering, was really profound, and it woke me up. I was already pretty awake, and didn't spend a whole lot of days on the couch, so to speak, ever in my life. But this really was like, all right, just if you're going to write, if you're going to build something, build it, but don't wait around, thinking that tomorrow is definitely, is going to come, because it might not. And beyond that, it really drove me too, because I was working on my own health at the time too, and I had massive brain fog. So for people that aren't familiar with that term, it's just, I'm sure a lot of you are, and you're like, oh yeah, I can barely listen to you right now. I have so much. I've been there, and that's mainly, in my experience, certain mineral deficiencies, and we can get into that. Heavy metal toxicity is something else that is, and that interferes with mineral deficiencies. But by and large, if you don't have mineral deficiencies, you don't have consistent, at least you have very, very rare brain fog, if you do have any. So I started to look at this from an anti-aging approach with her, and I realized, I did a lot of testing for me and for her, and I realized that we were both not absorbing things we were taking for quite a while. Over a year. So you look at it and you go, well, I've been taking fill in the blank, for example, magnesium and selenium and potassium and manganese for anywhere from 8 months to 18 months. And I'm chronically deficient in all of these. And then I
Mhm.
have high levels of other things that I'm not even necessarily supplementing or thinking about. And I just got very interested. And today at Upgraded Formulas, we offer a better version of that consultation that changed my life,
Mhm.
because the consultation's key. It's not just about reading numbers off the page. It's
Mhm.
not just about treating based on data. It's about the culmination of listening to people
Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah. I say
and
that all the time.
right,
Mhm.
really
Yep.
listen, like really listen, and that in itself is healing, right? Because
It
most people,
is.
as you know, Amy, like have never been listened to in their health, have they?
Right.
You're right.
No, you're not going to get that in conventional medicine. So you have to find that elsewhere, just that listening ear.
Mm. So that's what we do now, and that's why we do it. I I went through chemical engineering, and I was working as an engineer right out of school as this happens, and I realized I had already started working on this idea, but it really accelerated it. This idea of, well, how do we get minerals to absorb a lot better? Because clearly they're not being absorbed well, and I was taking that extra year to try to find other brands and takes and directions. And I realized I really have to just create something from scratch, new, that is going to do this and fill this need. And now that's what we offer, and that's why, you know, you've heard people in our groups together just kind of rave about some of our products. And I'm really proud of that, because it's come after a lot of hard work. And frankly, now when someone follows our process, if they have any of these issues, it's a big step. It's a big leverage point for sure.
So you hit on two nutrients that are vital, especially with thyroid conversion, and that's magnesium and selenium. And it's true. And I think you've spoken to much of the audience, because I know that we are all popping magnesium and many people over pop selenium. And I will see super physiologic levels of selenium on blood work, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that is indicative of what is actually being absorbed in the body. So can you get into one thing that you and I talked about that I just found, well, I mean, there's so much that we have to talk about today, but one thing in particular was how mineral absorption issues can actually hold you back in your energy level, can produce sleep issues. They can affect your adrenal and your thyroid function, as well as even viral and bacterial susceptibility. They can throw off your sex hormones for both men and women. So how is that? How does the process of poor mineral absorption happen? And then what's that trickle down effect to the thyroid specifically?
It's a great it's a great question. There's a lot in that. So the minerals in general activate all the enzymes in your body. And another way of saying that is the minerals in your body cannot be activated without those specific codes, which are minerals in this case, not vitamins, but minerals.
Mhm.
So that's why I wanted to start there. And we test for minerals, and so we get a feeling for where people really are. And instead of just using intuition or blood work, we use hair, and hair is tissue, just like skin is tissue. And we say skin is our largest organ. If we say that, which is kind of an odd thing to say, really, you know, is it an organ? I mean, it's on the outside of your body. It's, well, what else? Hair is also on the outside of your body. And instead of doing a skin biopsy or a liver biopsy, we do a hair sample, and we do the inch or so closest to the scalp or underarm or pubic or chest. You know, we can take from a lot of different places. We can even do fingernails. And that gives us a really good picture of what to focus on. Now, to what you're specifically saying here with, all right, so how does that affect thyroid? Well, the building blocks of the hormones themselves are, you know, minerals primarily. So they're minerals and fats. That's the building block for every hormone in the body, right?
Mhm.
So without minerals and without testing for minerals, so adequate levels of all the minerals that you need,
Mhm.
um, and you know, multivitamin's not going to cut it,
Right.
and and a multi-mineral is not going to cut it. Like, you need to be testing your levels. Otherwise, you really, when you step back and you really look at it like it's someone else's data, you go, oh, well, clearly if you're not testing, you're guessing, like, clearly. Right. So I mean, in the same way that if I said, here's a cliff, I mean, I give you $100,000 to jump in the water, but you don't know how deep it is. It's either plenty deep enough or it's so shallow and you can't tell that you're going to break every bone in your body, even though it's only like 20 feet. Most people wouldn't take that gamble, but most people don't realize that's what they're doing with their health when they're not testing. And
great analogy.
Yeah, that's a brand new one just now.
Yeah,
I was
I like that.
You know, I just got back from Maui and we did some cliff jumping there, and maybe that's where that came from. So,
nice.
So as it relates to thyroid, you need certain minerals. You need iodine, certainly. That's a big one that a lot of people know. And you need more iodine than you think you need. More iodine than, when I say you think you need, than the RDA, certainly, by a lot.
Oh, absolutely.
By a lot. I think the RDA is, in place to keep us from getting disease. And so therefore it's a minimal, it's a very, very minimal lower end threshold. And you see, for example, Japan, who has a much longer lifespan per capita, they eat about 80 times more iodine per day than we do. So they're eating something like 12 milligrams, which 80 to 100 times the RDA. So we have a large dose, and that's why. There's a lot of people that are kind of regurgitating information they've heard about, well, if you have this thyroid condition, you should have no iodine at all, which is complete and utter BS.
Yes.
From a physics standpoint, it's like, I can just tell who doesn't understand chemistry and physics at a base level. And I hope some people are hearing that and getting offended by it, because they need to be offended. They need to wake up and they need to change their advice. The reason why is because you need to continue making thyroid hormone no matter what condition your thyroid is in, right?
Right. Exactly.
You cannot, can you do that without iodine? You can't adequately make it, right? So that's also true for selenium. You need some selenium, you need some zinc, and you need some copper to activate your SOD pathways and things. So that's all, and we put that all in one of our thyroid blends that we have on the site at Upgraded Formulas. But and that's one of the things I struggled with, right? I had been a wrestler, like one of the top in the nation in high school, could have wrestled in college, self-induced hypothyroidism because of from the weight cutting, from the intense practices. I know we talked about this.
Oh yeah, I feel you. Same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was something that helped me figure out discipline early in life and go into something really difficult like chemical engineering. And it also caused a lot of nutrient deficiencies. And I'm sure I wouldn't have had such terrible issues early in life. I haven't been overweight, but I've been low energy. And that's always just come back to, oh, well, your minerals were right for a while and you stopped testing and then you got off. And now you're way off again. So it's one thing that I do tell people, it's worth the time to stay consistent in the testing of this.
No, it sounds like, I mean, you're even opening my eyes to the importance of regular mineral testing and really seeing where people's levels are on an ongoing basis and seeing if the supplements that they're taking are actually being absorbed. And I mean, it really sounds like your own pain to purpose story. Like you were gifted with the mineral deficiency so that you could tie it together and bring people better information than what we have available right now.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I uniquely found this spot where I'd been supplementing since I was 12 or 13. And by the time I had this issue, I'd been supplementing for over a decade and really interested in nutrition. I'd already gone through chemical engineering, and you had to take a process, industrial process, and improve it with nanotechnology techniques and tools, equipment. It's a very practical degree. It's really interesting. So super technical, and yet I was interested by it, interested in the application. I saw it being the future of nutrition for sure. And it kind of surprised me that someone hadn't really solved this well prior to us doing it. And I'm just really thankful for people that need this solution. And what I will say is everyone listening can benefit from this for sure. Whether it's like healthy levels of improving the metabolism or sleep or whatever it is. Yeah, it's
all of the above.
Yeah.
Because all of the listeners have metabolism problems and sleep issues and low energy. And I know that they're all popping a magnesium and a selenium and a zinc because they've heard me talk about it, or they read it on a thyroid blog, or they read it in Facebook, or heard on Dr. Oz that it's good for your thyroid. But yet I bet 90% don't actually know their levels, except for maybe what has been tested in blood. So can you get into why is hair better than serum, than blood for mineral testing? Because I know myself, I just always run a blood test on my patients to check for the mineral levels. So why is hair better, and why can blood be misleading?
It's great. Really good question. Well, blood can be misleading because it's a day's worth of data. So we don't really know a trend. And when we don't know a trend, it's a lot like jumping into that water again, because in that example, it would be as if you know the water's depth right now, but the water depth changes every instant. So you know it at one instant, but then it changes. And what hair would be offering you is saying, well, the water is 32 feet deep, and it's been 32 feet deep, or that's been the average depth over the last 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, actually, for 1.5 inches of hair. So, and if your hair is shorter than that, obviously that's fine too. You need about, well, there's instructions on the site, but it's straightforward, and you can always find a way to do it. So so that's one way. One reason. The other reason is because, the minerals in hair have actually become building blocks, and that's a measure of what has been utilized. So with blood, like you're saying, it's getting into the serum doesn't mean it's getting distributed throughout the body, and that's absolutely correct.
Right.
So that is, and the other really important thing is when you look at mineral ratios and mineral to heavy metal ratios, you really want to be looking at A over B, B over C, C over D, D over A, D over B. You want to look at ratios of these things. So you want to look at, what I'm really saying is the relationships between these different minerals. So you're measuring them all on one playing field, and you're measuring all of them with this hair test that we offer, at least. So what's super interesting about that is that it sort of negates the testing error, even if there was any, even though we're coming from a CLIA certified lab, and I could tell you what that means, and what it essentially means is it's above and beyond any laboratory certifications out there. But the thing that's really interesting about that is when you get that, you actually get to see thyroid function from hair, and you get to see adrenal function, and you get to see metabolism, and you get to see a few other things like hormones, all from hair. And it's all in one test, and it's pretty affordable. So it's easy to do, and it's less invasive than giving blood. You can do it inside your own home. You can have someone else help you with a sample. You can bring it to your hairdresser or your stylist or your barber and have it done. And they should be actually happy and sort of interested by
yeah.
Oh, what are you doing? Like,
what are you doing with that hair? Yeah, exactly.
So I've been cutting hair for 20 years and never seen anyone do this. It's like, oh, well, this is a new thing that you should be doing. I've had that conversation so many times. It's great.
Hey, it's opening the eyes of people all over, but no, that's a good thing. Yeah.
It's really, really cool. Yeah. It's opening the eyes. So So with that, you get with these ratios, you really get an amazing picture. And if you ever test your blood work for thyroid function, you can see that, if the hair said you were overactive also in blood, which
Okay.
is interesting. So from that, but the other way to know it's really accurate is that I can look over someone's test, and we have a team of nutritionists with, I guess 6 nutritionists now that work with us full time, and they have their availability. So you go through, you get your results, and you choose one that matches your schedule, and they go through recommendations of supplements and foods. So the thing that's interesting there, and we have a practitioner course for people too if they want to go through and get certified. But the interesting thing is, seeing people really get it and go like, wait a minute, so I really feel in control of my health for the first time because I ordered this test myself on the website. I got listened to by someone for the first time about my health, and then I'm taking supplements and not drugs. And I know that I need these supplements because my test showed that I need them. And then I'm going to retest in 90 days, and I will see that my levels have moved. So I know things are working. It's great. It's how it should be.
Okay, so let's unpack the experience, because you were talking about A over B and D over B, and I think you might have lost some people. So let's back up. So we do the hair test, do the test. We get those numbers, and we can actually see, because I've heard of obviously zinc to copper ratio. Many of the listeners have heard of that, but you're actually looking at the ratios of magnesium to copper and iodine to magnesium, and you're looking at all the different ratios of the minerals to each other. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. So we're looking at, there's a number of different ratios that we look at. We look at about 7 different ratios that are most important. And those are actually more important than individual levels too. Yeah.
Okay. So that's interesting. Let's pause there. So let's say hypothetically somebody has, like I said earlier, I see this all the time, too much selenium because they're pounding, the selenium they picked up at Sam's Club that's 200 milligrams per capsule. And they're doing that every day because they heard it was good for their thyroid, but they're not taking their magnesium very much. So they have super high levels of selenium in blood. Mm-hmm. Will the hair analysis also pick up that this person's taking way too much of a cheap selenium?
If they are taking way too much and it's not being utilized, yes.
Okay.
If they are taking too much and it's being excreted by the body and cleanly, then no. I mean, it won't show an excess. At least it'll show that the person that actually may have a deficiency, or they may have, which is the true case.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So that's interesting, because just because we see it elevated on blood does not mean that they're taking too much, because we really can't tell that via blood.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love that. And then you had mentioned, I don't want to pass over iodine because it is important. I talk about it all the time on this podcast, all the time. I love iodine. I think it's vital. I love Brownstein's work. I do believe that we should be taking more than the RDA or sprinkling some iodized salt on our food. But that's a very controversial topic. I love it. But
it's really interesting. I recommend that for people. It's there's a study in there that I cite often, which is a 6,000 person study, revealed that 96% of people in that study, 96% of 6,000, so all essentially, some of which were taking iodine already, said they showed a deficiency in iodine. So virtually all showed a deficiency, and that tells you that we're not taking enough and we're not absorbing enough.
Mm-hmm.
And
what is, so hair kind of trumps the 24-hour urine and serum collection, and even the provocated iodine 24-hour urine collection. So we can get more out of hair analysis with iodine than we can those other tests, right?
I'm glad you asked that. So iodine is one thing that we found that is really in such small amounts in the body that it is not testable with accuracy. People will sell you tests and you will get markers and readings and you will display some iodine. And unfortunately, in today's world, it's not accurate. So we've made the decision to pull iodine off of our hair analysis for that reason, because we don't want to mislead people one way or another. It's in too small of an amount. What we can say, though, is that by looking at some of your other ratios through hair in larger amounts, we are able to accurately tell you where your thyroid is. And if your thyroid is low, you probably need more iodine. In addition to the other things that we know for sure that you need.
Right. Because you're getting a definite reading on the mag, on the selenium, on the zinc, and all the other minerals that are building blocks for the thyroid. So no, I love that. I love that. So back to the experience of the person gets the hair sample, they send it in to you, they get the reading back. So they're reading, if they're my patient, they could come to me and I could read it for them. But if they're not my patient, they get the opportunity to actually meet with someone on your team that can interpret that test for them.
Yeah.
Which is a beautiful thing.
Exactly. That's right. So the way it works is the results go to whichever email was entered at checkout. So if that's yours, if they entered that, their practitioners, then it goes to their practitioner automatically. So you can have them still fill it out. You can do it for them, whatever you choose. So go to that email, and then they have the option to either, get a consultation with us, do it through their practitioner. If their practitioner's, well versed in hair analysis, there's just so many things. Like there's, I always ask people when they say they're ready, or they're very confident in interpreting hair analysis, and say, well, I spent the last 10 years studying this, and I have a really intense science and math background, and loved chemistry and stuff. And I still found that it was the toughest functional medicine test to learn, and I've learned some of all of them. And this one was really interesting to me because I personally had such a dog in the fight, and I had things that I needed to correct. But there's always things like, there's hidden copper toxicity, which obviously by the name doesn't show that there's copper toxicity in the patient's chart. But if you know how to look at, there's like 9 different factors that you sort of check. If the majority of those are in the sort of, call it a yes column, like, hey, calcium is greater than 50, sodium's less than 12, potassium's less than 4. Copper and zinc are between this ratio. Sodium to potassium that ratio is really low. Zinc to copper is over this. You have high mercury on top of that. Your Molly B is a certain way. Oh, whoa, you have hidden copper toxicity. Wow. That would have been impossible to find through blood.
Yeah. That even seems, I'm going to leave that to you to find. That seems complicated for me too.
It's like, there's just no time to be a specialist in everything. So I love paying other people that I trust that are specialists in other areas that I'm not a specialist in. So I really think that's the model of the world more and more.
Oh, and, so true.
Yeah. And I'm totally good with that.
Even in the functional space, I'm always complaining and ranting and getting on my soapbox about this, but so many of my listeners have spent thousands in the functional space, but not with a thyroid and hormone specialist. And they'll end up with somebody trying to fix their gut, which is great, but that's not going to put more T3 in their body. So I completely understand. I will tip my hat to the experts where necessary. If I don't know how to do something, I'm going to ask for help and give it to you to interpret for sure.
That's the way to do it, Yeah. And we look at, so we don't look at gut health, for example. That's something we always pass off, but I feel like it's such a great place to begin, and it's a beginner's place, but it's also an expert's place, because you can be spending all the money in the world that you can possibly spend at any anti-aging protocol, any gadgets, any biohacking equipment, any of it. And if you're not testing your minerals, because the entire planet is made of what we're testing, then you can guarantee that something's out of whack, and there's something being left there.
Yeah, you know what? I haven't had my minerals tested yet with you guys, so I think what we have to do is do mine, and then you can come back on and interpret it.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, let's do that.
Because I am a biohacker, anti-ager. I have every device in the entire world, the red light, radio frequency, the whole deal.
Yeah.
But I will admit it on here, I have not tested my minerals. I have not. So besides blood, like a year or two ago.
Sure.
But of course, it's like the occupational hazard. We don't
right.
test ourselves. We test everybody else. So yes, sure. We definitely have to do that. And I want you to also touch on, if you would today, because with thyroid comes insulin resistance. And I am I don't even want to say keto, because then I get the deer in the headlights. Look, I can't do keto, but low carb. I am a low carb advocate because most of my patients do have insulin resistance along with their hypothyroidism. And we know when you're doing low carb, we know you always hear people say, oh, you got to take salt, you have to take electrolytes, all of that. So how do you even know that you're doing those electrolytes that you're pounding in your water while you're doing keto and trying to avoid the keto flu? How do you even know that you're doing them right if you're on a low carb keto diet?
It's a great question. You don't unless you're testing, is my answer.
Back to the testing. Yes.
It's, that we trademarked the phrase that should have not been available a few years ago. I mean, started the company in 2015 and trademarked test, don't guess a couple years ago.
Did you really? I always say that. I didn't know if it came. I didn't know it came from you. Okay.
Yeah, we literally own that trademark in many of the countries in the world, and that shouldn't have been available. And it really speaks to how much it needs to be a slogan for a company like ours, because people are clearly missing it. They're like, we just want to buy turmeric and then go back to our life. And it's like, I also wish it was that easy. I do. And it's not, and that is not going to change. And, trying to forget about it as you scroll your life away is not going to help, or doing any version of that, right, where we're ignoring the problem is only going to make the problem worse. So we made it super easy. I wish I would have killed to have something as straightforward as what we offer now for people and with products that really work. So yeah, that testing is just super, super helpful. And that's how you know.
Well, yeah, because I see people do this all the time. I mean, they will buy every electrolyte powder on the market because they heard it. And it's not that it's not good for you. You do want electrolytes when you are going low carb, because there is that dehydration, pushing out of water, where we do lose some of the mineral content in our body. But again, I mean, you have to test. So when would you say would be the best time for someone? Let's say you have someone that's starting a low carb, ketogenic, quote unquote diet, or you have someone like myself that's been doing it for years. Mm-hmm. When is the actual best time to test each of those people? Do we wait until the newbie gets into it a little more, or do we test them in the beginning?
We want to test them in the beginning and before they're starting any diet protocol. And then we want to test them in 60 days, ideally, and then at least in 90 days. Intervals. So every 2 to 3 month intervals as they're changing. If you're doing diet variation, you're changing things, then every 2 months. And if you can cut your hair really short and take a half inch off or so, that half inch will grow back in 30 days. So you could even do it sooner. So it's just, it's just a matter of getting the data and getting the map. And it's a good question. I'm glad you asked that so people can think about it, because, the answer really is, when do you not want a map of where you are in your health? And the answer is never, right? I always want that, that affirmation of where I am, so I know with confidence what I shouldn't do at the very least. I shouldn't be supplementing calcium right now based on my personal results at all. And that's the case for most people. I'll just tell you, after looking at thousands of results.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, you and I are so much in agreement on so many things. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, the one of the ratios we look at that definitely affects thyroid function is calcium to potassium. And when you have too much calcium, it really makes potassium, harder to absorb and keep and retain really in the body. So the body can sort of cycle potassium, but it can't, with too much calcium, it doesn't retain it very well. So you get a lower thyroid function just by having too much calcium.
And calcium will bind to thyroid medication too.
Yeah.
So if you have too much calcium in your system, it's going to bind to, and then it's going to make it inactive and impair T4 to T3 conversion.
Right.
Yeah.
So with that right there, you start to see where calcium is great if someone is overactive thyroid, for some reason. And in the rare, that's becoming more and more of a rare thing. We almost never see that. Almost never see it. Even people that think they're quote unquote hyperactive thyroid or hyperthyroid, they really are intermittently producing too much, and they're getting a blood test during those times, and it's reflecting that. And they certainly have some periods where that thyroid is just spitting and sputtering, and it's giving you highs and really lows, and you're just not catching the lows. So it's possible, and it does happen. It's just more and more rare. So.
See, that's very interesting, because I know, I mean, I have patients, so if they're listening, they need to listen up. And I know that there's listeners too that experience this, where, I mean, number one, they will get a blood test, and their doctor, of course, will maybe test TSH only and go by that, and it's super low, so they'll be called hyper. But even if that doctor does the actual thyroid hormone testing, provided they didn't just take their medication before their test, they could show slightly hyper. But then you ask them, they go, no, I am not hyper at all. I'm still gaining weight. I am still tired. So that's very interesting that you brought up that point of getting this testing. If you've been called hyper and you feel hypo and you still have the symptoms of hypo, it might be just a mineral deficiency. It could be a mineral excess that is causing your numbers to look like they're hyper. And I agree with you, Barton. It's a swing. If you test these people, and I've even told my patients this too, that said, well, it's looking like I'm a little hyper. I'm like, well, if you don't feel it, you're not, but let's retest in literally like 2 to 4 weeks, because I bet that number is going to be different. You're just in this weird swing.
Right.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up.
And then it's doubly true with women and hormone swings throughout the month, depending on age. And, there's just all sorts of factors at play. So having more of an average like you get with hair is the way to go. If you can only do one. And I even say, like, continue doing, if you're a practitioner listening to this, continue doing what you're doing, but also do this now that now that you have this clarity that, you've heard us really lay this out. It's just a great thing to add to your practice. And, we allow people to work with us that way too, through, sort of affiliates. And that's really my goal, is to just better, to give better tools to the practitioners out there. And the education. So we have the education, we have a course that people can go through that's very short, but gives you, the confidence to be able to interpret these results. So that's cool. You can find that on the site as well. I'm ultimately, my goals are to change healthcare with this test and with mineral supplementation that really works, and transform sick care to healthcare, and, in the areas that we're able to, at least. And I think what that looks like is really creating its own entire ecosystem outside of the world of medication that we think of as medicine. And there's just no fixing that world. That's a totally different thing, motivated by totally different people that don't listen to shows like this, really. Because they work for companies like Pfizer, and You know, the Hippocratic Oath doesn't say anything about thou shalt listen to Pfizer, you know, and yet that seems to be the direction we're going. And I don't like,
Indeed it does.
yeah.
Indeed it does. And I don't think anyone that, like you said, we won't get taken down because no one from Pfizer is listening to this
Yeah,
anyways.
no, they don't think they don't think this works, and they don't think anything works, so they're just in a cash grab.
Well, I think one thing works, but we
Right.
won't go there.
Right, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, I
So,
think one thing works.
I mean, I think, you know, really in summing this up for people, know your levels, use supplements that really work, know if your supplements are needed, because you can actually be harming your health if you're taking too much. So check out our test and consult on the website, or test and then get the results to your doctor, however you want to do it. But a normal doctor won't, unless they've been trained specifically in this test, they're not going to have training in it. It's not normal because, well, the way, if you go back to what they studied in college, that was paid for by pharmaceutical companies, and they obviously don't want to test where the natural result is, oh, you're deficient in minerals, something we cannot patent.
Right.
Therefore, this test is not a priority for you to learn, because you're also ultimately just a, you know, employee, and you don't know you're an employee. Training, and you know, that's the reality. But we're working beyond that. So, and we're always able to learn new things too. That's the beautiful thing. So.
Well, and it's companies like yours that are bringing it to the forefront, and it's practitioners like myself, like you, that are kind of breaking that stigma. And I get this question asked all the time: why don't doctors test? Even just thorough thyroid testing with blood that we like to see, why don't they? And it's because there's not a band-aid to put on an elevated reverse T3. We can't throw a statin at it. We can't throw an antidepressant at it. There's not a medicinal band-aid to throw at it except T3, which, you know, God forbid they do that. So I think doing this kind of testing, bringing this to the world is just that next step in everyone taking control of their health and not being a slave to the medical system, and not being a slave to insurance or to what your doctor says yes and no to, because you don't have to accept their answer. You can do things for yourself. You can get knowledge for yourself. And this is part of it. And that's the beauty of functional tests like yours. Well, I'll go into the difference in a second, but that's the beauty of it, is that you can order them yourself as a person, as a patient. You don't need myself or a medical doctor to order them for you, your PCP to order them for you. You can order them yourself and get the information yourself. The other thing I like about your test, and I think the reason why people tend to not get into the functional testing as much, is the money. It's because, you know, I have this one subset of patients that they will have a Dutch test, a GI map, a doctor's data, a heavy metal, a nutrient, a mineral, a hair test, a urine test. I mean, they'll spend every test money on every test in the book, and they have no idea what they mean. And then we have the other subset of patients that go, listen, I just spent a copay of $200 getting my blood work done. Do I really want to drop another $1,000 on a functional test? No, but you make this very affordable for people, which I appreciate.
Totally. Yeah. Less, what, $297 for everything.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why you can afford to do it, you know, more often. And it's just a top-down approach, where it's like, if your minerals off, your hormones will be off. Your minerals are off, your thyroid will be off. If your minerals are off, your adrenals will be off. If your adrenals are off, your thyroid is off, your metabolism is off. You know, it's just like
that trickle down effect.
Yeah. Bone health will be off. Brain function will be off. Sleep will be off. You know, it's just, so it's by no means the only thing that people should do. They should do plenty of other things. And there's other tests I like, but as a company, this is the only test we do, because it's so clear to me that I wanted to give people one place to go where it's like, at least do this. You know, this is what I noticed personally after doing awesome tests like oat tests and things like that. And they are really valuable, that I just saw that everyone needed. So it's like, there's some tests that like maybe you need a mold toxicity test, but I won't know that. And you won't always need that. And you won't have symptoms that ever suggest that you need that your entire life, possibly. But some people really need that. And it's like so that's a sometimes thing. This is an all the time thing.
This is an all the time thing. Yeah. Because it affects so many functions and organs and processes of the body. So one question I want to, two questions that I want to ask you before you go and kind of give the listeners a summary and where they can go to get this test done. This is just kind of an all-in-one. So you're testing all the minerals at the same time together. There's not different groups where people would go on and be like, oh, I need B test instead of A test. It's just one test, correct?
Yeah. Just one test. Yeah.
Okay.
One test.
Perfect. That makes it easy.
And there's the option to get it with or without a consultation. And so very affordable. And then, if they're sending the results, they can get them and send them to whoever they want to send them to, just via email, lock PDF. So pretty cool. Very easy. And the kit ships out to you in 5 days or less, and then after you send it off, you usually get your results within 10 business days at the long end of things. So
that's perfect. And we will put the link in I'll put it in the chat right now if people want to order their own. We'll also have this in the show notes when this is released tomorrow as a podcast. And if they use the term or if they use the code FIX at checkout, that gives them 10% off of that test. So thank you for offering that to them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that'll be 10% off there. And then I see someone asked, should you test all minerals at the same time, or is there a group that's good to test together?
That's what that's what I was asking with that question.
Awesome. Okay. So you kind of covered that for people, but what's beautiful about the hair test is you do want to test it all at once. And that's what we do. And
then for that second question, you cannot go to a lab with your hair and ask them to test minerals. It's not going to happen.
No. You need special equipment for that. That's calcium, how it's toxic. Yeah, we talked about that too. So I think we covered a lot of this in the questions. So really cool.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us and giving all this information, because some of it's new for me. I can't wait to do my own test. I will definitely have the consultation to interpret it, because I don't claim to know what I'm looking at there. It does take, and I do want to go through your course to actually learn how to interpret, because I want to use this on my patients much more. Sure. So thank you so much for bringing this information to the forefront, to the table, for people to be able to learn and educate themselves and empower themselves with new information to literally transform their thyroid and hormones.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Amie. It's such a great conversation.
All right, Barton. I will definitely have you back on. Take care.
Yeah, really enjoyed it. Thanks.